High in the tower, the backdrop of Musatafu stretched as far as your eyes could see through the large French windows that opened out to the horizon. You crashed into the training mats, your lungs winded by the throw, while you cringed in slight agony. You breathed to ease the pain, and yet ironically stung your ribs with each heave before a pair of golden eyes looked down at you from above, that cocky smile plastered on his scar-ridden face.
"What's wrong, Dove?"
cooed Hawks, offering his hand to you.
"I thought you were taught better than that."
It's been years, you cringed, while you accepted his invitation, his strength pulling you up from the mat.
Yeah, but it's been weeks since you've been put on the field.
In your place? A swing and a jab of your fists caught his attention while he dodged effortlessly, defending himself in this one-on-one scenario. Thanks to the commission, training was provided in secret to keep your presence and identity under wraps. That usually included some form of disguise before setting up shop in an empty room, undisclosed to the public. This time it was set in a government building, recalling your past life working in an office. Another strike of your hands slipped past Hawks before he grabbed you from behind, trapping you in his hold. You twisted left and right, pulling at his strength until you hooked your foot behind his. With leverage, you tripped him backwards to topple him from behind, leaving him winded before twisting your legs around his arm, trapping him in a wrestling hold. For an agent, you're great, you commented, your hands gripping his wrist while your legs trapped his head. But as a handler, don't... You quipped in surprise with the strength Hawks had been holding back, throwing it against you and forcing your legs to curl in. In an instant you found him above you, pressing his weight and wrestling against you on the mats. His large hand grabbed yours, pulling them above your head, and inadvertently left you defenseless.
"I think I handle things pretty well,"
he responded coyly.
"Having no wings does have its advantages."
A flash of red whipped past your eyes before a tickling sensation attacked the top of your nose. You couldn't help but smile from the gesture, turning your head away from the feather, only for it to follow your every move. Stop! You laughed before it fell back onto your chest, leaving you staring up at Hawks with a pout. Cheat.
"Come on, Dove. All fun and games."
He chuckled, his nose lightly brushing against yours teasingly. Yeah, until somebody loses...
"Don't finish that."
Hawks slid away, pulling himself up before offering his hand again, lifting you up from the mat. Your breath drew heavily from the bouts, standing with sore arms and legs while you stared out towards the skyline of Musatafu. The daylight made Esaha City look like a drab place, but you knew its nightlife was a sight to see. Lately you had only been moving around in secret, except for the sneaky date or two, which Hawks loved to coin the experience. Still, the growing threats to the city were concerning.
"You've been doing some good,"
assured Hawks while he wrapped a towel around his shoulders, wiping the sweat that accumulated throughout the day.
"The Commission's been finding this partnership useful."
Doesn't it feel weird though? You mused, still staring out at the large windows of the room. After all of these years in hiding, suddenly there's those fires in Hosu, the Tartarus incident, then fires at the industrial district, that consult for that mission on Naboo Island, and also the recent getaways of some illegal traveler.
"Don't forget that fiery rampage through downtown Musatafu,"
added Hawks.
"But Endeavor's looking after that one."
You sighed heavily, wondering what was going on to make you worry. You saw the chess pieces in your mind, staring up at the ceiling and calculating the events. It was strange for your quirk to act in this way, the pawns as smaller events and the players as the larger, more intense catalysts surrounding everything. But the scope was too great, It frustrated your mind, unable to see any clear steps ahead. It felt like the game was playing itself.
You worry too much.
Calmly assured Hawks before he noticed your eyes darting and staring, wondering and calculating. He firmly held your shoulders, snapping you out of your hypothetical, if not figurative, chess match.
Dove, this is good. And maybe my quirk will grow back in no time.
He continued while he firmly held you. I know, but don't you want to find other options to help you?
You're helping me.
He assured once more, his smile bright and hopeful before he gave a light peck on your forehead.
And the commission doesn't need to know everything that goes on between us.
You smirked at the gesture, closing your arms around his waist and closing the gap in between. He merely smiled warmly, while pressing you into his chest despite the sweat both of you were covered in after training.
Go get yourself cleaned up, Dove.
Advised Hawks, releasing you from his embrace before he made his way to the bathrooms available on the floor. Silently, you too made your way to another, taking your towel that laid haphazardly on the floor to wipe the sweat from your brow. The heat of the shower relaxed and calmed your muscles from the session. You expected a bruise or two, but they were casualties of war. A silent war, behind the tall shadows of the city. There were a few times you tried convincing yourself to manage these twisting events in your head over the 7 years you had been in hiding. A thud or two, muffled by the walls, took you by surprise, while still drenched in the shower, immediately switching the shower head off. "Kago?" you called out, hearing nothing in return. Scrambling from the cubicle, you reached out for your towel, wrapping it around while you quietly stepped out into the bathroom, your wet feet tapping lightly on the tiles. You were met with only silence, shaking off the lingering presence you felt while you began changing into your clothes. Those thuds returned, catching your ear and returning that presence once more. "This isn't funny," you called out. "Playtime's over!" You found yourself on the cold tiles after smacking into them, feeling the wind escape your lungs from whatever slammed into your body. Curled on the floor, you pulled yourself onto your side until a hand pushed you back, forcing you into the tiles face down. His weight pinned you while you struggled with your hands pushed into your back.
Target has been acquired,
he announced with a low whisper.
Returning to home base.
That wasn't Hawks. You pushed against his weight while the strain pressed into your shoulders, feeling the tendons pull against their fibers as if you were on fire. You were trapped in this hold until that tiny red feather sprung to life, twitching against your breath. One sweep of your body to swing your legs freed you from underneath, tripping over your assailant before you laid eyes on him, surprised by what you found. He looked no older than a teenager. His dark hair matted atop his head, while a face mask disguised him. He stared you down, eyeing you inquisitively. "Who are you?" you asked aloud. Suddenly he was no longer there, but behind, his speed almost invisible to the eye. You swung only to miss and be met by a kick into your gut. Winded once more, you keeled over, swinging another punch to miss again. Whoever this attacker was, he was quick on his feet, only appearing to send grief your way. You felt every jab and every strike, soon shutting your eyes from the pain and listening instead. You couldn't trust your eyes, finding that you were seconds late to even touch this boy. You caught your breath, heaving from the pain, until the feather around your neck tugged, sending your punch to land on the boy, staggering on his feet, confused. You witnessed it, feeling that strike through your knuckles in shock. That was until he immediately retaliated with a kick into your chest, sending you flying through the bathroom door and out onto the training floor. The momentum sent you skidding onto the mats that laid across the large space, tumbling until you felt all of the pains course through your bones.
Dumb!
Yelled a familiar voice, spotting Hawks running towards you. He stopped in his tracks, blocked by your attacker, who sped into his way, striking him before Hawks caught his leg, unperturbed by his speed. It caught the boy off guard, soon facing hand-to-hand with every move against the former pro hero. You watched the scene unfold, finding Hawks face off against your attacker while you rose to your feet. The speed at which Hawks matched the young boy was mesmerizing, in sheer awe of Hawks' expertise now in action. Yet it came to a slamming halt when a sudden burst of electricity shot from the wall, striking into Hawks and sending him flying towards you, crashing into the mats. Standing by your attacker with electrical sparks flying around his vicinity was another teenage boy, his blonde hair gently swaying amongst the static, while his face mask helped in keeping him anonymous. His eyes smiled smugly at you, glancing at the grim boy beside him, who met his gaze. In tandem, they raised their fists, mirroring each other with their backs against one another, ready in wait. You watched them closely, finding that they were in absolute sync. Aside from the cosmetic differences in their looks, they were perfectly aligned. In a rush, they charged towards you, in time and in motion, swinging their legs to strike. You prepared for the collision until a tug at your neck signaled you otherwise. Hawks' hand clutched onto your shoulder, standing beside you before he blocked your left, while you blocked the right, halting the strikes from the boys. In that moment, as if time slowed, you quickly glanced towards Hawks, as did he, soon counteracting with the assailants, with a strike of your own. A punch and a kick here and there broke the sync. However, your intruders found a way to swap and dodge, weaving until they struck once more with an uppercut in tandem, slamming their fists into your gut as they did Hawks. Both of you flew back, tripping over the mats and crashing in a heap together, rolling until Hawks landed atop you, his arms keeping him from slamming into you on the floor. The boys returned back into their stance in perfect sync, watching both of you still in a heap, while Hawks heaved to keep alert.
We've got company,
informed the blonde, capturing his dark-haired counterpart's ear.
Pro heroes inbound. Fat gums.
With eyes glancing around the room, both boys heard the tiny patter of feet circling the walls, quickly and quietly distributing paper around the room. A sign for things to come. You cringed and stifled a whimper before staring up at Hawks, his eyes turning slightly towards the boys, who looked distracted somehow. He quickly glazed his golden eyes onto you, searching for your look before you intuitively nodded in silence. With a grab of his hand, Hawks pulled you up from the ground, smoothly transitioning your stances while he swung you. The momentum sent your feet in motion towards the slightly distracted intruders, followed after by Hawks, who quickly met your speed. The boys turned too late, finding both Hawks and yourself on top of them, leaping to send a blow into their faces with a bone-crushing punch to the jaw. Now in sync yourselves, you struck in succession with Hawks, each strike successfully slamming into the boys. Every so often they countered and blocked, only to be swept up by the tumult and the burst of sheer will from your duo. The muscles burned, the joints ached. It didn't help that you both just came out from a training session between each other to be attacked in secret. Still, taking the boys by surprise gave you the upper hand, soon ending the onslaught with one final kick in their guts, returning the favor in tandem with Hawks and sending them flying across the room. They crashed into the mats, skidding away with grumbles and whimpers of pain themselves, leaving Hawks and you standing before them in stance, backs against each other. The heat that radiated from your body was overwhelming, and yet it intermingled with the heat that coursed along Hawks' skin, standing beside you and almost touching every once in a while amongst the exhaustion and exertion of the fight. You eyed him beside you, finding that smirk on his face.
What?
You uttered breathlessly.
I'm impressed.
He cooed between breaths, his eyes almost sultry with every exhausted heave of breath he pulled into his lungs. You couldn't help but smirk back at his reaction, feeling the burn in your muscles and your lungs all the same. A moment that was short-lived when the sound of shuffling caught your ear, turning to find the boys already on their feet, a little defeated, but some distance away now. Despite your want to chase them, something else caught your eye. Or at the very least, someone else. Between the boys who held onto their guts from the final blow was a young girl with long blonde curls and a face mask herself. Despite this, she smiled happily at both Hawks and you, waving her tiny hand in the air with cheerful pleasure.
Bye-bye!
She yelled with joy before she grabbed hold of the tall blonde boy's clothes, as did his darker counterpart, departing from the room with a loud clash of electricity into a free port in the wall. The sparks flew, its fiery heat soon lighting a fuse that dangled heavily from their escape. Your eyes quickly found its destination, noticing the walls were lined with an assortment of paper that smelled acrid and sulfuric.
Run!
Ordered Hawks, grabbing hold of your wrist and almost flying towards the doors that led to the fire escape. Slamming into the door, Hawks pushed through, dragging you behind him down the stairs. You never reached the next floor until... The floor exploded in a fiery fury, destroying what was left of the makeshift training room organized for you and Hawks into nothing but broken debris. You coughed and heaved from the dust that settled from the blast, finding that you landed on the next floor of the stairwell, staring up at the crumbling mass above from the explosion. You yelled in between your coughing fits, attempting to stand to your feet, leaning against the wall beside you. The sirens in the building echoed in what felt like the distance, muffled by the thick walls of the fire escape that trapped your exit above. You eyed the stairwell below, finding that there was still quite a while to go before safely reaching the ground floor.
I'm here!
Yelled Hawks, crawling out from the debris above the piece of stairwell still intact from the blast. You carefully stepped up the concrete stairs, reaching for Hawks' hand to pull him out from the makeshift cave-in, his legs kicking sporadically to free them from underneath. Movement was a good sign, seeing that he had not broken anything during the explosion, but with a heavy pull and freeing him, the precarious sounds of concrete and metal cracked and heaved above, soon caving atop the stairwell that began to crumble from the weight. Hawks grabbed hold of your wrist once more, dragging you behind him down the stairwell before you followed suit, hopping and bounding across stairs while the debris above caved and crushed into itself. Pieces of stone fell from above, bending the railings and succumbing to the remnants of the blast that must have shook the building onto itself. How many floors did you have to traverse? It was difficult to see in your mind with the pieces in play now that you were fleeing from crushing concrete. 2 flights of stairs? Was 1 floor? Was accounting on the 10th or the 12th? Was management lower? Or human resources?
This one!
You yelled across to Hawks, who immediately slammed into the fire escape door on approach, reaching out for your hand and pulling you in from the falling debris. A billow of dust plumed from the door before watching the stairwell collapse from behind the swinging heavy door. The building was falling apart, watching the scarce few employees left on whatever floor you directed Hawks to exit onto. Peering out the window, you noticed the ground floor wasn't far from the floor you found yourselves in, but still too high for a safe jump from the windows. Times like these you wished Hawks' wings returned, much like your first few encounters with him years ago. A pull of your arm left you running after Hawks once more, following him towards where people were funneling into. Elevators had shut off due to the explosion, leaving only the public stairs that attached each floor in the main lobby. You ran as fast as your legs could carry you, keeping your balance from the rumbling building that was on the verge of collapsing onto itself. You ducked and weaved between falling debris, noticing the infrastructure of the floors crumble under the weight until a bright light hit your eyes, finding yourselves now in the main lobby filled with people running for the glass exits. Hawks kept an eye on you every once in a while, hoping he hadn't left you behind too far while avoiding the debris that crashed onto the tiled floor. You both merged into the crowd of people, finally making your way out of the building and spotting the devastation left from the explosion caused by those kids where you once stood. Police officials and emergency personnel rallied the crowd, funneling them safely to a distance away from the skyscraper should it fall. Within the panic, Hawks quickly snatched a few items from people in the crowd, using the panic and mayhem to avoid suspicion, while he immediately slipped a cap onto your head.
Who were they?
You asked, affixing the cap on your head while Hawks did the same for himself.
How did they find us?
Not sure, but right now we gotta move.
Quickly ordered Hawks, grabbing a hold of you and clutching your body against his.
Stay with the crowd. We can't be seen.
Immediately slipping the hoodie of his jacket atop the cap he borrowed, Hawks weaved through the crowd of panic-stricken people, soon making his way out from the emergency zone and past personnel alike. This wasn't new, but to watch the skyscraper precariously leading from the destruction made you worry, knowing that the both of you were the cause of this so-called terrorism.
You head home. I'm going to pay a visit,
commented Hawks after making it out onto the street away from the crowds and the panic. He turned to leave, only for you to stop him in his tracks to turn back on you. You gazed into his eyes, noticing that look all too well, one fueled by suspicion and rage.
Be careful,
you whispered, your fingers clutching onto his arm with a tremble, only to feel the touch of his hand atop yours to calm your nerves.
You too.
With one final look, Hawks turned to leave, releasing your hand and shielding his face from any public eyes. You knew which direction he was heading, hoping that he'll find some answers sooner rather than later, especially with the checkered past he had to deal with and suffer with along the way. You fixed the cap he intentionally borrowed atop your head, shielding your eyes while you made your way towards Hawks' apartment, which was kept under lock and key on its whereabouts. Perhaps some chess games were needed, some probability numbers needed to be generated, despite the lack of information you had on those children that attacked you and the reasons behind their actions. It was difficult to play a game with the little information you had, and without knowing who was running it.